Hey, James here, and welcome to the Morning Muse. This morning I saw an article about Lewis Spears, a performer, a comedian, an artist who had the pleasure of working with twice, because he booked me, and he's doing really well with himself, or for himself rather, over on YouTube. There's a link down below. And during the Melbourne Comedy Festival, in his set was a particular joke about the royal family, and he, a member of the audience, shouted out from the audience that Prince Philip had died, and then he spun on his heels, made something else of the material as a creative would, and the audience went apoplectic. They just kicked off. They thought it was funny as anything. The media, however, didn't. Now, I'm not going to get into here the pros and cons of doing bad taste material, as some would say, but I do find it interesting, and we've got a further, fuller explanation of what may be possible, something to think about over at the studio. So that's where we're heading now, just to the studio. Off we go. Just let me get this off. It's a bit too bloody hot. But I wear this all the time when I'm going out walking because it serves its purpose. A bit of a struggle to get it. But the hair being what it is, I mean, look at it, right? It will be getting cut, trust me. Anyway, Prost, Lokheim, Skål, cheers. Stinianas, Stiniasas, yeah, and all that stuff. Yeah, it's still just instant coffee. It's not the Peter McKinnon sort of stuff, but you know, in time. So there I was out in the morning walk, and the thought came to me from something I saw yesterday. Lewis Spears, but he did something at the Melbourne Comedy Festival where he talked about part of his set was jokes about the royal family, and just as he was getting into that, somebody shouted out from the audience, Prince Philip has died, or maybe the words were Prince Philip's dead, and he spun on that. He took that, and instead of upsetting the set, as it were, he just drilled down in it and made something different of it and changed the path in regard of it to some degree. And he had the audience again eating out the palm of his hand. They thought of whatever he was coming out with was extremely funny. It reminded me of two performers. One of them, long since gone, unfortunately, the late Bob Monkhouse, but also Eddie Izzard. Now, as a street performing, busking professional magician, and been doing it for 20 years around the world, yada, 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 how did Eddie Izzard, bless him, get from being a street performer to where he is now? What was the kernel? What was that inception point? What happened? So one day I was in Covent Garden. Covent Garden. Yeah, Covent Garden. So a lot of the performers, or some of the performers rather, that are still there, doing other things, but they're still there, they worked alongside Eddie Izzard. So I went up to one of them many, many years ago, Alex Dandridge. Beautiful person. Why is it that so many people within the busking community are just really good people, you know? My kind of people. Anyway, yeah, I spoke to Alex Dandridge and I said, Alex, these aren't the exact words, I can't remember, 20 years ago. I said, Alex, you worked alongside Eddie Izzard, so what's your insights, what's your thoughts in regard of how Eddie got from there to there? I'm not saying that's higher, but from that point to that point. What did he do initially to get that happening? What was it about him? Because no disrespect to him, obviously, he was just another street performer doing street performing things in Covent Garden. And Alex said something that was really quite poignant. He said, well, he worked harder than a lot of us. So I thought for a moment, well, what does that actually mean, he worked harder? He said, well, there's a little coffee shop, just a bit of history. There's a little coffee shop round the corner from where the street performers do the draw in the morning to see which spots they get and so on and so forth. And so they can actually free up the rest of the day to go about their own business, because a lot of them have got families, so they've got life to live outside of work. And Alex said Eddie would go to the little coffee shop where a lot of them went to, and he would sit by himself. It's a small coffee shop, but he would sit by himself. He'd get one of the daily newspapers, I'm not sure which one, and he would sit there with his coffee or his drink or his food, and he'd sit there with the paper and a notepad and working hard. This is what working hard means in this particular scenario, is that he would write down the most poignant headlines of the day. Not of the continuous stories, the second pickup, the third pickup, but of the day. Primarily the main headline, I'm sure, probably which was above the fold on the newspaper, above the fold, technical terms, above the fold, And he would write that down, and then he'd work that into his material. So that day, that show would be completely different to the show from yesterday and different from the show the following day, because it was pertaining to that particular headline. He'd work that headline into the show. He'd make what he does extremely topical. Let's see if I can fix this a bit better. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he'd make that show particularly topical, which then went on to other things, and he grew from there, because if that was a part of his daily routine, the thing he did every single time he went to work, then that became bigger than Ben-Hur, because then other things happened because of that. As to what, I'm not sure, but that's an inception point for sure, right? To work hard in regard of your material, so you make it topical, so that people can, you can see where that goes within regard of an audience. People go, oh, and they remember the feeling. They remember it. It's really quite an interesting thing. So I think that's what Lewis has done to some degree. Whether you agree with the content or not is not germane to what I'm sharing with you. It's just that's what he did. I think that's fascinating. But onto the second person, I was going to mention two people: Eddie Izzard, Lewis Spears, and the late Bob Monkhouse. I was going to mention three people. Yeah, that's shades of Monty Python. Nobody expects to spec. Yeah, whatever. The late Bob Monkhouse. Here's another example. The late Bob Monkhouse, way back in the day when there were touring shows all over the UK, it's not the way it is now, obviously. Touring shows all over the UK. He was at the bottom of the bill, the playbill, because in advance of the troupe, Troupe, the troupe, going on to the next venue, the next city, the next town, the next stop in the tour, there would be an advance team who would go up with playbills, and however a performer played in that particular arena or field would maybe be or not be in the next show. But Bob was in for the whole tour, but he was at the bottom of the list. So what he did was, which is quite fascinating even of the time, when they went into a new space, a new city, a new village, a new town, he would get the local newspaper. And the local newspaper, he would write down what the headlines are. Do you remember this about Eddie Izzard? He would write down what the headlines are, and he put that into his material, into his set. So as the advance team carried on advancing, what Bob Monkhouse saw was his name was, although near the bottom, if not at the bottom of the bill, it slowly creeped up through the middle, till he, by the end of the tour, he became the headliner. And that's just from attenuating to the detail every single day that you're going out to perform. Look at what's topical. Look at what's out there. And use that to further your career. Because a career in performing isn't just about that one show. And there's an old adage, you're only as good as your last show. Yeah, that might be the case. But it's a career. It's what you attend to. You're not playing freaking games here. You're working hard on your stuff, working hard on your material, working hard on your marketing and your selling and everything else that goes along with it to get to where you want to go. But you have to have a realization and an understanding of where you want to go. Anyway, that's all I've got to share with you in regard of the bit of the morning news as to what Lewis Spears did. But I really would like to hear what your comments are below in regard of what Lewis did. Let's look at the videos, check it out, and also what your thoughts are in regard of using topical material. I think it's germane. It's not something I've attended to over the years of being a street performing busking professional magician traveling around the world 2 times and visiting, whatever. But we're going to be coming out of COVID soon, and we're coming out of the pandemic. So that being the case, that's something that I will attend to, because doing magic on the street isn't just about the magic, it's about the connection you make with an audience. What do you want them to remember when they leave? What feeling do you want to give them? And I find that really quite fascinating. So that's something I'm going to attend to. Maybe in further future morning muses or vlogs even, I'll be able to share some of that actually in situ with you as well. Now, another thing about the pandemic and going back to it, everybody's a bit wary of money. So I'll be using busktip.com. There's a link to it down below as well. So you can, if you're a street performer, you want to get cashless payments, check out the link. But that's it for another episode of the Morning Muse. Got a couple of videos up there. Oh yeah, the one that I did with Lewis Spears, the video I did with Lewis Spears in that salubrious venue where I swallowed 3 feet of cold hard rubber. You can check that video out. It's here somewhere. Anyway, live life and love it. Love life and live it. Look after yourselves. Look after each other. And do good in the world. Ciao for now. Oh, one last thing. That will be ground coffee at some point, but right now it's just instant. Maybe I should get lessons from Peter. He is partly Scottish, apparently. That's where his heritage is from, with a name like McKinnon, one would imagine so. And something I didn't realise. He's actually a magician. Something I didn't realise as well. I think he's got something heavily to do with illusionist.com. Never knew that. And the funny thing is, I don't tend to... He's got a magic channel as well, but I don't tend to look at the magic channel. I just look at his photography and video channel. I know I mentioned all of this in regard of him being one of the 6 that I follow and watch. You can see the video up there. Oh, one last thing. Yeah. Noah Kagan. All of this video, this idea about talking about what Lewis has done and what I've remembered from Eddie Izzard and also from the late Bob Monkhouse, all of this alludes to something I learned from Noah Kagan. It's about newsjacking or news hacking. If you think about it, it's what Eddie Izzard did. It's what Lewis Spears did. It's what the late Bob Monkhouse did. And I suppose in some way it's what I'm doing by using that particular title, of course, but to get to a different purpose. Anyway, it's not clickbait. We did talk about it, and I'd like to hear what your pardon me, instant coffee, shite, right? And I'd like to hear what your comments are below. Yeah, so that's it. Aye, you can go now. You still here?